Hello there, this is part 3 of Unit 3 for the Level 9 RCM course. And last time we spoke about voice overlapping and also about parallel intervals and how to spot them. So now I'll share my screen and we can continue on. Something that's very interesting are accented passing tones and neighbor tones, and this occurs on page 31. There's a bit of a description there. So what you want to do, of course, just like we did in Unit 2, is non-chord tones, of course, are notes that are not part of a chord. They are, you can have a passing tone, which is a part of a scale, where the passing tone is a non-chord tone that happens between two chord tones, but moving step by step, so you can either go up or down. Neighbor tones are where the non-chord tone is either above or below a chord tone, but you go up from one note and then back to the same chord tone. So for example, if I were to change the camera and explain this, a neighbor tone could be from C to D and back to C, especially if we are using the C major triad, C, E, G. The D is the non-chord tone, C, D, C. You're going up and then back again. Or you can also do the same in the opposite direction. C, B, C. Now a passing note would be, or a passing tone would be the D, of course, as the non-chord tone, but we would travel up in a scale format. C, D is the non-chord tone, going up to the next chord tone, which would be E, or moving down. G, chord tone, F, non-chord tone, E, chord tone. Now, essentially, an accented passing note or accented passing tone and an accented neighbor tone are basically the same thing, except that the non-chord tone happens to occur on a downbeat, hence the word accented. So in any of these cases, when you're looking at the notes within a bar of music, you want to, of course, take note of every part of the treble clef and bass clef, and piano pieces especially, to see what the overall harmony is. So you'll be looking at each note and seeing what the common notes are to see what chord is being used. And then for any non-chord tones, just like we did in Unit 2, we would circle them. But if a passing tone or a neighbor tone happens to occur on a downbeat, it is called an accented passing tone or an accented neighbor tone. Now, when we're harmonizing as well, this basically means we take into account all of the notes within one bar of music to see what chord can be formed. If we were to look at this example 3.11, you can see how we have a C, we have another C in the bass, we have an E, another C, and a G. So that chord is actually C, E, G. Now in the key of C major, that chord is the tonic. So all of the notes of the first bar are all C major. So we could label that as 1. When we get to the next bar, you would do the same thing. C, there's a C in the bass, an E, another C, and then G with an octave G. So all C major again. So when you're looking at certain bars of music and we need to decide on which chord is which, it would be the same process. I always look from the bottom up. That's just been something I was trained to do many, many years ago, and it's always worked, especially for piano music. Now, when we're harmonizing a melody, we always want to think about deciphering the melody and the chords. We always want to match them together to know what chords are being used. So now what we can do is actually skip ahead a little bit, and let's go to page 32. Page 33. Essentially, for the analysis questions, what you want to do is take into account each key The answers are written here, of course, so you can use that for your help. But then you also want to think about sometimes there are going to be different chord changes occurring in each bar. So you always want to kind of take a look at a few notes at a time, see if there's any common notes, and then see what kind of harmony is being used. And if there are two chords in one bar, you'll notice that the grouping of notes will change in the treble clef and bass clef whenever a chord change occurs. Sometimes in a piece of music, you'll find that the same chord might be repeated for many bars, and that's fine too. But the chords we're going to be deciphering are 1, 4, and 5. So it'll be a good practice to kind of to get used to finding the key of the piece and then seeing what the notes are in each chord and marking them down, as well as any non-chord tones. Now the goal would be to work on pages 33 and 34, a question at a time. And then also on page 35, we'll scroll there, you will see how there are certain cadences that we need to decipher. So the main thing will be to look at the cadences, see what they are, and also to see, without showing the answers, you'll also want to see what for question 2, what voice leading errors have been occurring. So that will be helpful. For example, here, you would want to do the same thing as what I outlined in a previous video. You'll want to look at the voice leading between bass to tenor for 2 chords at a time. You want to look at tenor to alto between 2 chords at a time, alto to soprano 2 chords at a time, as well as soprano to bass and alto to bass as well. And it's always a good practice to look at one grouping of voices for 2 chords at one time. So for example, you'll want to check the tenor to the bass for 1 chord to another. Then you go to the next one chord to another, so that you can kind of differentiate things. A lot of the time you'll find that there aren't any errors, but there might be some. And if there are, you'll want to mark them in. Usually when we mark an error, what you want to do is put a like a bracket around or close by, like what we see here, what you see here. And then you want to write an 8 if there's an interval problem. Or if there's a voice leading problem, you want to circle that. Just to help with various issues, like if there's voice crossing, or if there's a doubled note, etc. And that would be some good work to do. As well, on page 36, there is some practice writing cadences, and they have specific melody notes here. And what they want you to do is consider these all to be different keys, of course, different key signatures, but the melody note will be the way to decipher what key you're in and also what cadence to use. And then from there, you want to write the cadence thinking about common tones where possible, and also proper voice leading, so there are no parallel intervals or voice crossing and any of that kind of thing. So working on that page will also be helpful as a good assignment. So I do hope that everything goes well for you, and have some fun as you're working on this part of Unit 3.